I want to start out by just saying that I've worked in both NATO and UN peacekeeping operations, whether it was in Kosovo or whether it was in other areas when I was in uniform. And I also recall a lot of issues. The UN, we can point to a tremendous amount of things where there's been longstanding concerns with UN peacekeeping personnel engaging in sexual exploitations, other types of abuse that's gone on. We found out that the 10 to 15% of all UNRWA employees, 13,000 of which are in Lebanon, are either supportive or have, in fact, been a part of Hezbollah. We found that 12 UNRWA employees actually took place in the October 7 attacks, and over 3,000 UNRWA teachers are on record and on video celebrating the attacks and the actual horrific incidents that took place. You also have radicalized curriculum that was part of the funding under the $343 million that America put forth. You have the United Nations Security Council, who, whether it be under General Secretary Ban Ki-moon or even Gutierrez, wouldn't even look at Resolution 2231 JCPOA violations when we had caught 2 different ships transporting mid-range ballistic missiles in direct violations of the actual UN resolutions. I've started looking at it and referring to it not as the United Nations, but as useless nations. We're not doing our jobs. We haven't redefined exactly what it is that justifies the continuation of funding by American taxpayers when we have seen a immediate expansion of what China's been able to do. This hasn't prevented China from the propaganda, misinformation campaigns to sow doubt by developing nations where they're now moving away from the U.S. dollar as a global currency. We haven't seen where this has in any way slowed down the Belt and Road Initiative. And in fact, the only thing that slowed down Belt and Road Initiative is China's own economy is suffering so badly that they couldn't continue to actually fund it. And they had more strikes last year in their workforce than they've ever seen throughout China's history. I mean, I'm having a difficult understanding of even justifying why we're a part of UN at all. And when these continue to be more and more of these issues that come back, we can continue to use the excuse, oh, well, we're not defined by, a couple of the employees. We're not defined by a couple of bad apples. I don't think it's a couple of bad apples. I think it's rotten to the core. And I think that there's an entire evaluation that needs to be looked at. So my question, first to start, Assistant Secretary Sixon, you've done considerable work throughout your career to counter trafficking in persons. Considering the prominence of U.S. funds in these peacekeeping operations, is it your assessment that the sexual exploitation and abuse proliferated by UN peacekeeping personnel reflect poorly on the image and reputation of the United States?
Thank you for that specific question on sexual exploitation and abuse in peacekeeping. And I do want to say that we, of course, watch like a hawk for any allegations in any other part of UN operations, including in humanitarian delivery, because it occurs there as well. But since we're here, to talk primarily about peacekeeping, we are leading on this. I believe that most member states and those who are watching this space see us pushing, calling for accountability, calling for the transparent reporting, calling for the repatriation of those who perpetrators. On a larger scale, sir, we do have an interest, I do believe, to my core, in making the UN better and working through the UN to deliver to these vulnerable populations. But we need to lead. We need to be at the table.
I apologize for interrupting. That's great that you're willing to look at reforms, but this isn't something that's just occurred. Throughout your career, these types of incidents have continued to take place overseas. These types of sexual exploitations, abuses, funding of terrorist organizations. We now know that the billions of dollars that went in to Gaza, many of which that cash was used for the terror tunnels that was there to launch the attacks. I mean, we're funding our own terroristic attacks, and we're saying we're there for human rights reasoning, but then allowing our own employees to be able to violate the human rights of those who are most vulnerable. I don't know that this is just simply a reform reevaluation. I think this is a whether or not the UN even stands for what it used to originally stand for, and whether or not we even need to be a part of it. And I'm siding on the side of us not being. With that, I yield back.